ready to start. Public portion for Standing Committee on Government Operations for Wednesday, January 25th, 2020. Good morning and welcome. My name is Frida Marcells. I'm the MLA for Kabacha and Deputy Chair of the Committee. Today we are holding a public review and clause by clause on Bill 61, an Act to amend the Ombud Act. This bill makes several amendments to the Ombud Act in order to expand the list of authorities that fall within the mandate of the Ombud, clarify the mandate of the Ombud, allow the Ombud to investigate complaints dating back to April 1st, 1999, provide additional notice requirements, including to Indigenous governments. Today's meeting is being live streamed on the Assembly's social media channels. As a standing committee, it is our role to review any legislation introduced in the House. The committee review stage provides stakeholders and the public with an opportunity to provide their opinions on whether they support the bill or not. It also allows the public to suggest changes to the committee to consider by bringing forward amendments they think may help improve the bill. The committee gathers input from the public in the form of written submissions or public presentations. The committee then considers all concerns brought forward when determining how best to proceed. I'd like to remind all members and witnesses to please direct all comments and questions to myself as chair. This will help keep the meeting organized and run smoothly. Please wait to be recognized by the chair before speaking. I will now ask the members to introduce themselves for the record. We could start with those online.
MLA for Inuvik Twin Lakes, Lisa Semler.
Thank you, Lisa.
Caitlin Cleveland, MLA Cam Lake.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. Richard Jarek on the MLA for Trinity Riding.
Are there any public presenters, Madam Clerk?
We have with us the witnesses. And we have staff members, as well as the law clerk. We have the advisor, Nigel Wadrich, committee support, Taylor Maxwell, law clerk, Sheila McPherson, and myself, Cynthia James. I will ask our witnesses to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rylund Johnson, MLA for Yellowknife North, sponsor of the bill, and I'm here with Toby Kruger, the law clerk. Thank you.
We'll now invite the member for Yellowknife North to sponsor the bill, speak with opening remarks or any comments you may have. Go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for the record fully, I want to speak to kind of how we got here and the proposed motions that committee is bringing today. Firstly, I want to thank committee for the review. I think it was great work. I've seen the correspondence both back and forth with the various stat officers, and committee did exactly what it was supposed to do. And I just want to remind committee kind of how we got here, that at the beginning of this assembly, the Ombud tabled their annual report. Committee had quite lengthy discussions, accepted some of those recommendations, tabled them. The government ultimately declined to bring forward legislation to amend them. We met with the minister, tried to push them, and so it was my intention to bring a private member's bill so that the hours and hours that all of us have spent talking about this issue and engaging of those issues kind of didn't just get lost to a report. So I am very happy to bring these changes. I do hope that the government will look at further changes to the Ombud Act. There were some that I felt were kind of beyond the scope of a private member's bill and did require some in-depth policy work. I also hope that the minister will reconsider his current position to not support the bill. I think the motions that committee is bringing forward were both raised by the minister, so I am hopeful that the minister can maybe come around and, at the very least abstain. And then I would ask my committee members to, talk to any other members who were not here during the lengthy discussions we've had with the Ombud over the last few years to support this bill, and hopefully we can get it passed. It's actually very, very rare that private members' bills get passed with cabinet opposition, but we have the majority of the vote, so there's some politics at play. I understand committee is bringing two motions today. The first is the removal of this language, the administration of a policy. This was taken directly from another piece of legislation, and the Ombud felt that is essentially her job, to review policies and administrative law, and that perhaps just that clarification could lead to some confusion about why that very specific language was being used. I think this just sometimes happens in legislative drafting, is that someone overthinks something and it leads to further clarification that may not actually help. The Minister of Justice also had concern, so I understand committee is bringing forward that motion, and I fully support it. I actually am not sure what exactly that was accomplishing either. The other is a motion, I understand, to exclude statutory officers, specifically human rights. I just would like to speak briefly, with committee's indulgence, on kind of how we got here. I will be supporting both of the motions and concurring with them as brought forward by committee. I thank committee. But so my understanding is in the last assembly, when we brought forward the Ombud Act, the committee and the regular MLAs actually asked for exclusion of its statutory officers. And then during the Ombud's report, they asked that they come back out, and I accepted that. And I think perhaps what I would suggest committee do is in its report is kind of point out that perhaps this is an issue that once again requires some revisiting in if the Department of Justice reviews the Ombud Act. And kind of maybe standardizing who of our statutory officers can investigate who. I don't think any of us would suggest that all of our statutory officers should be exempt from the Human Rights Act and human rights investigations. If the Ombud doesn't have an accessible office, a human rights complaint can be initiated. If the Ombud fails to deliver services in official languages, an official languages complaint can be investigated. If the Ombud decides to, breach privacy, an Information and Privacy Commissioner complaint can be investigated. But that none of those offices can be subject to an Ombud investigation for procedural fairness. So, it has actually led to some inconsistency, and arguably we inherently have inconsistency with our statutory officers, as some lie with the Legislative Assembly and some lie with the government. I'll note the rental officer is now subject to the Ombud because the rental officer is a government statutory officer, but you could imagine a world just as easily where the rental officer reports to the Assembly. So I think perhaps if the government is going to look at the Ombud Act, they could perhaps step back and try and resolve some of these inconsistencies we have with our stat officers. I'll note the other private members bill I brought during this assembly as chair of caucus was a consistency of statutory appointments for our stat officers, and a couple of them buckled at having their appointment timeline go from 5 years to 4 years, and committee brought a motion to change that. And so the end result of our consistency legislation was that some are back to 4 and some are at 5 years. And arguably, I think we just, perhaps the Assembly and the stat officers that the government have, someone, ideally the Department of Justice, needs to look back and see where the inconsistencies are and try to bring them all together. But I'll note that presently the Ombud Act allows the Ombud to investigate these other stat officers. They just have to ask permission first, which I think is a completely acceptable compromise that the legislation initially found. I also think it's worth noting that, sometimes stat officers inherently bristle at anything that is perceived at intervening on their authority. They are arm's length, and I get that, but it's worth noting that the Ombud investigations are purely recommendations. She has no order-making power. They are non-binding. I really would encourage all stat officers, including the new ones that are now subject to the Ombud through the government, to view this as a service to be used. She is an expert in administrative law. She is an expert in procedural fairness. Her investigations to date have been very high level and extremely helpful to those organizations, such as employment standards and the rental office, I know, who are overworked and probably could use some outside expertise to just make sure they are following the most recent case law on administrative law and procedural fairness. That is all I have to say. I just want to once again thank committee, thank the Ombud, and once these motions are done, I hope committee will work with me to go back to the Minister of Justice and hopefully get his agreement to vote in favor of the bill. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, thank you, MLA Johnson. Does committee have any questions for the sponsor of the bill? None. Does committee agree to proceed to the clause-by-clause review of Bill 61 and act to amend the Ombud Act?
Agreed.
You? Committee agrees to conduct a clause-by-clause review of Bill 61 and act to amend the Ombud Act. We will defer the bill number and title until after the consideration of the clauses. Clause 1 and 2?
Agreed.
Agree? Clause 3, as chair, I want to recognize MLA Jerkin. He will read the first motion. MLA Jerkin.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the clause 3 of Bill 61 be amended and proposed paragraph 15, brackets 1, and brackets A by striking out and quotations relate to matters of administration or the implementation of the policy, and substituting relates to matter of administration.
Motion is in order. The motion is on the floor. To the motion,
Question.
question has been called. All in favor? All those in favor?
I'm in favor.
Jerkin, you're in favor also, of course. All those, there's no opposition. No opposition, motion is carried. Does the member concur?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I concur, and I just want to clarify, earlier in my statement I said the confusion was around administration, it's implementation. But yes, I concur. Administration seems to capture everything the Ombud does without these words implementation. Thank you. I concur.
Clause number 3 as amended.
Agreed.
Clause 4 and 5.
Agreed.
Clause number 6, I recognize MLA Zembler for clause number 6.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that clause 6 of Bill 61 be amended by deleting proposed paragraphs 23 brackets B and brackets C and substituting the following. Brackets B, the Equal Pay Commissioner as defined in subsection 1 brackets 1 of the Public Service Act. Brackets C, the Human Rights Commission established under subsection 16 brackets 1 of the Human Rights Act. Brackets D, the Executive Director of the Human Rights Commission appointed under subsection 23 brackets 1 of the Human Rights Act. Brackets E, the Adjudication Panel as defined in subsection 1 brackets 1 of the Human Rights Act. And brackets F, the Information and Privacy Commissioner appointed under subsection 61 brackets 1 of the Access to Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Brackets G, the Integrity Commissioner as defined in subsection 73 brackets 1 of the Legislative Assembly and Executive Council Act. Brackets H, the Languages Commissioner as defined in section 1 of the Official Languages Act.
Thank you, Emily Zembler. The motion is in order. The motion is on the floor. To the motion.
Question.
Question has been called. All those in favor of the motion?
I'm in favor.
I'm in favor.
What about, is someone on the line still?
No, she isn't.
So there's no opposition, motion is carried. Does the member confer? MLA or
I concur. Well, not me.
I concur.
so clause 6 as amended is amended. Agreed?
Agreed.
Clause 7 and 9 agreed?
Agreed.
Clause 10 to 11 agreed?
Agreed.
Schedule sections 1 to 5 agreed?
Agreed.
Does the committee agree that Bill 61, an act to amend the Ombud Act, as amended, is now ready for consideration as a whole? Mr. Jerkin, do you want to just discuss that with your
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the Bill 61, an act to amend the Ombud Act as amended, be reported to the Assembly as ready for consideration in the Committee of the Whole. Thank you.
motion is in order? Motion is on the floor. Motion.
Question?
Question's been called. All in favor?
I'm in favor.
I'm in favor.
Motion is carried. Bill 61, an act to amend the Ombuds Act, as amended, will be reported to the Assembly as ready for consideration in Committee of the Whole. Thank Mr. Johnson. That concludes the public portion of the meeting. I would appreciate it if the members please stay for the wrap-up. Members, take a 5-minute break.